On Thursday, Russia unleashed a storm unlike anything Ukraine had seen in months. In the span of a single morning, 574 kamikaze drones and 40 ballistic missiles rained down upon residential neighborhoods, tearing through streets where families walked, children played, and daily life struggled to survive the war. These were not strikes against soldiers. They were not aimed at trenches, tanks, or military depots. Instead, Moscow's weapons found their mark in apartment buildings, schools, crowded marketplaces, and the heart of communities. One of the worst-hit areas was near the facilities of FlexLit, an American manufacturing company operating in Ukraine. The explosions ripped through the district with merciless precision, shattering glass, igniting fires, and burying lives beneath rubble. In a matter of minutes, the toll mounted: 9 civilians dead, 19 wounded, and among them, 5 Americans, bleeding on foreign soil. Through the haze of smoke and fire, the human cost became impossible to ignore. In a destroyed neighborhood, amid twisted steel and crumbling walls, the cries of a grieving mother cut through the chaos like a blade. She knelt in the debris, her hands trembling as she clawed toward the remains of her home. Her son had been trapped, his life stolen by the strike. With her voice breaking the silence between distant explosions, she screamed into the air, "Why my boy? Why him?" Her anguish echoed across the ruins, a haunting reminder that this war was no longer confined to borders or politics. It was an assault on innocence itself. For Moscow, it was framed as triumph. For America, it was provocation. For Ukraine, it was survival, and for the world, it was horror. By mid-morning, the wail of sirens became the soundtrack of Ukraine. Firefighters, medics, and desperate civilians surged into the impact zones, pulling survivors from collapsed structures, carrying the wounded, and searching for those still buried beneath the rubble. The devastation stretched across multiple cities. More than 200 buildings bore scars of the assault. 46 were reduced to little more than ash. The message from Russia was unmistakable. They were willing to strike deep into Ukraine's civilian heartland, even if it meant slaughtering families and targeting American-linked businesses. The world's eyes turned instantly toward Washington and Kyiv. In both capitals, fury ignited. This was no longer just another escalation. It was a direct challenge, a slap in the face of America, and a bloody reminder to Ukraine that the war was far from over. Inside the Oval Office, President Trump sat stone-faced as the briefings arrived. Every number on the page: -570 for drones, 40 missiles, 9 dead, 5 Americans among the wounded, struck like a hammer. Finally, his silence broke. "This," he growled, voice sharp as steel, "is not simply an attack on Ukraine. This is an attack on the United States itself." The words hung heavy in the air, undeniable and final. Across the Atlantic, President Volodymyr Zelensky appeared on a secure video link. His face was pale, exhaustion carved into his features, but his voice carried an unmistakable fire. "If we do not strike back now," he declared, "tomorrow, there will be 500 dead, 5,000 wounded, 50,000 homeless. Ukraine cannot wait, and neither can America." Then came the voice of General Raymond Cole, commander of U.S. European Command. His tone was deliberate, simmering with restrained rage. "Russia thinks terror can shield them. They believe slaughtering civilians and spilling American blood will force us to retreat. They are wrong. For every missile they fire, we will send 10. For every drone they launch, we will answer with fire that will erase their bases from the map." The room fell silent. There was no applause, no need for words. The weight of his vow spoke louder than any speech. Everyone present knew retaliation was no longer a question of if, only when. Within hours, a secure line connected Washington to Kyiv. Trump and Zelensky locked eyes across their screens. On both ends, fury burned, determination hardened. Neither man entertained the thought of negotiation, pause, or retreat. Their decision was swift and unanimous, a counterstrike so precise, so overwhelming, that Moscow itself would feel the flames it had unleashed. The date would be remembered, August 20th, 2025, A day when Russia's skies trembled with fire. A day when the war crossed another threshold. And a day when the world braced for the consequences of retribution. The outcome would define the very course of the war. There would be no negotiations, no back channels, no ceasefire talks, only a single, brutal decision. A joint counterstrike, swift, overwhelming, unforgettable. The choice was sealed in less than an hour. At 1400 Kiev time, encrypted commands burned through satellites and fiber-shielded cables, binding two nations together in one iron will. The mission was given a name, whispered with cold precision, heavy with purpose: Operation Iron Thunder. This would not be just another strike. It would be unlike anything seen in the war thus far, a storm forged of steel, code, and fire. The blueprint called for two waves of destruction, layered and synchronized with ruthless perfection. Ukraine would strike first, unleashing its swarm of machines. Then America would hammer deeper, heavier, wielding weapons never before used against Russian soil. From hidden hangars beneath central Ukraine, more than 200 combat drones stirred to life. An armada of algorithms and steel. Each drone carried either high-explosive warheads or electromagnetic payloads designed to blind Russian radar arrays and cripple the vaunted S-400 missile batteries. At the same instant, 48 HIMARS launchers and 90 Vilkuem rocket systems were primed, their target lists locked onto Belgorod and Kursk. Waves of fire would rain down, tearing through rail yards, ammunition depots, and armored staging grounds. But that was only the overture. From the darkness above Poland, 20 B-21 Raider stealth bombers waited, silent predators of the night. Each carried payloads designed to level hardened bunkers. Their orders: pierce Russia's airspace, annihilate Engels Air Base, and reduce the Saratov Missile Depot, where over 60 nuclear-capable bombers and stockpiles of hypersonic weapons were kept to ash. Beneath the cold waters of the Black Sea, 3 Virginia-class submarines sat in silence, their tubes loaded with more than 120 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Their targets: command posts, radar grids, and fuel depots stretching deep into Russia's western interior. Above it all, the sky would belong to the West. 36 F-35 Lightning E's and 18 F-22 Raptors would sweep clean the air, jamming communications, and striking down any Russian aircraft daring to rise. The plan was merciless, its reasoning ironclad. By marrying Ukraine's swarm tactics with America's deep strike precision, the objective was not retaliation, it was decapitation. In one night, Russia's frontline command, airfields, and arteries of supply would collapse. Inside the war room, the countdown began. General Cole's voice cut through the silence. Cold as steel, the Russians sent 574 drones. We'll send 1,200 back. They fired 40 missiles. We'll erase 40 targets before dawn. And by sunrise, Putin will learn what it means to provoke the United States of America. The operation clock ticked toward midnight. The storm was about to break. August 21, 2025, 23:59. The skies above Ukraine were deceptively calm. Then, in less than 3 minutes, the horizon erupted. 1,200 Ukrainian combat drones burst forth from silos, farmlands, and camouflage trailers. Their rotors howled like locusts rising from the earth. To the naked eye, it was a constellation lifting into the heavens. To Russia's sensors, it was chaos incarnate. The first wave plunged toward Belgorod and Kursk. Russian S-300 and S-400 batteries lit up the night, launching over 300 interceptors in 10 desperate minutes, but the swarm was too dense, too fast. 150 drones broke through, fuel depots exploded. In rolling fireballs, 25 T-90 tanks erupted, their ammo cooking off in a chain of violent detonations. Railway hubs crumbled as rockets hammered the lines, tearing apart 11 munitions trains in seconds. Even as the swarm struck, the second act began. From Poland's night skies, the 20 B-21 Raiders glided like ghosts across Russian airspace. At exactly 1:20, they unleashed their payloads over Engels Air Base, 16 hardened hangars disintegrated in thunderous firestorms, obliterating more than 30 nuclear bombers worth billions. Seconds later, Saratov ignited the missile depot, went up in a detonation so vast that windows shattered 40 miles away. Below the Black Sea, the Virginia-class submarines spoke. 126 Tomahawks streaked inland, low and fast. Command posts blinked out, radar sites fell silent. One missile punched straight into a bunker housing senior officers, later confirmed. 43 Russian commanders killed instantly over eastern Ukraine. The skies turned savage. 36 F-35s and 18 F-22s carved through Russia's air response. In under half an hour, 17 Su-35 fighters were reduced to flaming wreckage, crashing like burning stars. Electronic warfare pods jammed communications across a 300-mile front. On the ground, Ukrainian artillery added its fury. 90 Vilcam systems fired salvos into Kursk's logistic hubs, flattening entire complexes. From orbit, satellites captured plumes of smoke rising 25,000 feet into the air, visible as far as Poland. By 3 o'clock, Russia's western defenses were collapsing, falling not piece by piece, but all at once. Operation Iron Thunder had begun. In less than 4 hours, the battlefield had been transformed into a graveyard of steel and fire. Over 300 armored vehicles lay in twisted ruins, 60 aircraft were torn from the skies, and billions of dollars worth of infrastructure smoldered in silence. Command networks were crippled, radar stations blinded, fuel depots gutted as if struck by a giant's hand. From Kiev to Washington, glowing screens carried the unfolding spectacle, every explosion caught in real time for leaders who understood they were watching history change. Inside a reinforced bunker, President Volodymyr Zelensky turned to his generals, his voice steady but his eyes reflecting both the cost and the promise of what had been achieved. For the first time, he told them Russia was bleeding where it once believed itself untouchable, and in the White House Situation Room, President Donald Trump leaned forward, the cold glow of satellite imagery painting his face as Russian bases burned in the night. His words, spoken barely above a whisper, carried the weight of iron. This is only the beginning. By sunrise on August 21st, the guns had fallen silent, but silence did not mean peace. The battle was over, yet its consequences were only just beginning to ripple outward. Across Russia's western frontier, where hours earlier thunder and flame had raged, there was now a void, not the silence of victory, but the silence of a network gone dark. Intelligence briefings made the scale undeniable, radar eyes blinded, command centers silent, supply lines severed like arteries cut in a single stroke. What had taken Moscow years to build, fortified by billions, had been shattered in one night. The shock reverberated far beyond the battlefield. In Brussels, NATO convened an emergency session. Behind closed doors, diplomats whispered that Russia's aura of invincibility had fractured. In Tokyo, Berlin, and London, headlines blazed with, "The same for words, America strikes back, global markets convulsed." Oil prices spiked, defense contractors saw their stocks soar. And in Moscow, the ruble collapsed to its lowest level into decades, a symbol of weakness the Kremlin could not disguise. Back in Kiev, President Zelensky addressed a weary but unbroken nation. His voice carried not only across Ukraine, but into every capital watching from afar. Russia wanted fear, instead, they have ignited resolve. Ukraine stands taller today because we do not fight alone. His words rang out like a bell, a message of defiance and unity that resonated with millions across Europe and beyond. At the Pentagon, reporters filled a press room heavy with anticipation. When President Trump stepped forward, the room fell into a charged silence. His tone was calm, deliberate, but every syllable landed with the weight of a hammer striking steel. When Russia fired 574 drones and 40 missiles into civilian neighborhoods, they thought the world would look away. They thought America would hesitate instead. Before dawn broke, 40 of their strongholds vanished. He paused, then drove the message home. This is not escalation. This is justice. The warning that followed came not from politicians, but from soldiers. General Raymond Cole, his expression grave, his tone unyielding, delivered the sharpest declaration of all. Let every adversary understand, logistics are not weakness, allies are not bargaining chips. You touch what we protect, and you awaken the full weight of our arsenal. We do not forget, we do not forgive, and we do not lose. The meaning was unmistakable. What began as Moscow's attempt to terrorize Ukraine had transformed into a lesson written in fire across the world stage. America and Ukraine together had shown they could strike into the very heart of Russia. For every hostile actor watching, from Tehran to Pyongyang, from Beijing to Minsk, the message was unmistakable: to provoke the United States is to invite devastation. The smoke still drifted over Russia's western frontier as the world struggled to absorb what had unfolded. What began on August 20th as Moscow's show of force -570 for drones, 40 ballistic missiles, ended in less than 24 hours as a catastrophe for the Kremlin. The destruction of fuel depots, command posts, and fortified bases was not merely a tactical win, it was a strategic earthquake. For Ukraine, that Night of Iron and Thunder carried a new name, the Night of Iron Thunder, proved that they no longer fought alone. The image of President Zelensky standing before his people, declaring that terror had only made them stronger, etched itself into history as a turning point. For the United States, the strike was not only retribution for the 9 innocent lives lost and 5 Americans wounded. It was a statement carved in fire. No attack on U.S. citizens or allies would ever go unanswered. Around the world, the message spread at lightning speed. NATO allies breathed a sigh of relief. Adversaries grew silent, and nations that had doubted. American resolve took careful note. The age of hesitation was over. America and Ukraine had written a new chapter in modern warfare, one in which precision, technology, and allied unity could dismantle even the most fortified defenses. Yet behind the statistics and the satellite images, the human cost remained.